Fertility for a woman declines drastically after 35 years old. Maybe you shouldn't procrastinate egg freezing. Maybe egg freezing is for you. Maybe egg freezing is very far away for you.
Welcome back to another episode of Superwoman Isn't Real. And today we're going to be covering a topic that I feel like we've skirted around in other conversations. It's sort of come up briefly, but it felt like it was time to do a really, really deep dive on this because so many of the women that listen and tune into this podcast have either been through this process, are considering this process, or know somebody that they want to help with this process. And so it was like a perfect conversation to be having right now. So we're going to be diving into everything we need to know about egg freezing, which I think is becoming more and more relevant. And actually, when I started researching this, I realized some of the stuff I know is really based on assumptions. It's not actually based on facts. And that's what really surprised me. So I'm very excited to have someone on the show today. We've got Sarita Stefani. She is one of the co-founders of Amilis, who are on a mission to really help demystify egg freezing, help women through this process, help women do fertility checks, and just help women get the knowledge, the information, everything that they need to go and make a really, really informed decision, which is what obviously this podcast is all about. Knowledge is power, as we know. So welcome to the episode, Sarita.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the time to be here and sharing all of your wisdom on this. I always like to start with, before we get into egg freezing, because it's a big topic, a little bit about you. So you've obviously dedicated now your life to this.
Yes.
Talk me through why it had to be egg freezing, why Amilis started up in the first place, and how long you guys have now been actually operating.
Yeah. So my background, I study finance. Actually, my first bachelor degree is in art.
Okay.
Then I study finance because I saw that everybody was earning money in finance here in London.
I did the same thing.
Here we go. So I was like, okay, I started a bit of FOMO. I'm like, okay, I need still to pay the bills. Finance it is. Hated my life. Quit. And then by chance I started to work in the healthcare space. In the big data for big play that sells data to pharma, life science company, governments, and so on. Then I started to become an expert in how does this demographic affect a specific population. I also at a certain point analyze how bad are women's health data. So little evidence, we got excluded from clinical trials. Then I also froze my eggs at the same time, that I was analyzing this information. And my father-in-law has a clinic in Spain, so I started to pester him with information around that, trying to understand what's the process, more about fertility, women's condition around fertility. I started to see, that my journey with other women that I was speaking with was the same. So I was walking blindly into a treatment. So my area of expertise in the data side and my personal journey combined to the advisor that we have, which is my father-in-law as well, his clinic in Spain and, all the information that I was gathering, I decided to create Amilis, and we're operating for around 2 years now to help women understand their fertility, which is the first step. And then if egg freezing is for them, walk into this treatment, not blindly like I did, and many women before me most likely did, but understanding that there are risks with the treatment. Is it for you? Is it not for you? There are millions of things that you should understand before also spending a lot of money for it.
Yeah, and I think you've tapped on something massive there. I have friends or I've spoken to people in confidence who I cannot guide them in any way when they say, oh, do you think I should do this? What should I do? And I'm like, I know so little about it. I feel like you start on Google, then you go down a rabbit hole. And really what women need is advice from other women. You need to be recommended somewhere. You need to so this is, I think, very, very relevant for today and the sorts of decisions women are making. So you went through egg freezing. Let's just touch on that a little bit because that's great. That's amazing. Yeah. How old were you? Why did you do it? What was your personal journey with it?
So I was 32 years old. Okay. My personal journey is that as soon as I met my husband, my father-in-law, and I was 28, my father-in-law was like, we should freeze your eggs.
Wow.
Yeah. It was literally this direct. We should freeze your eggs because, me and my husband left for a month to New Zealand. And then every weekend we were somewhere traveling and, I was also traveling a lot for work at the time, and I had no intention in my mind whatsoever to get married and have kids. I knew that I would stay with my husband forever, possibly. Yeah. But, you know, I had no intention that. So I procrastinated for 3.5 years. And then when me and my husband decided that, you know, we don't know when we really realistically are going to have kids, we froze eggs. But I'm saying we, because obviously, you know, like we talk about it and everything. But it was ultimately my decision because, you know, like you put yourself through a surgery at the end of the day, short surgery. But, you know, and you have to inject yourself with hormones. So there's like...
It's all your body.
Yeah. You know, you go through things and, you know, like it's uncomfortable.
You know why your story is so unusual and interesting, I'm glad. It's because you're in a relationship. You're actually like a lot of the boxes that people... Oh, okay, I'm in a relationship. It's fine. This will figure itself out. Or if it doesn't, like, whatever. You actually did things in such a different order, which is really refreshing to hear. And I think what's different about your story, someone told you, go get your eggs frozen, and that never happens. It's often like a little voice in the back of a woman's mind of like, should I do this or shouldn't I? And should I talk about it? And maybe I should mention it to my family. Maybe I shouldn't because I don't want to scare them or alarm them. You know, there's all that in the head. But it was so nice in your story that somebody just looked at you and said, go freeze your eggs.
And, you know, like it was somebody that had my health at in first position, you know, like they're really, like he's my father-in-law, right? Yeah. So like nobody cares more than him for me, or his son, you know, like, so it was like such a direct person. And, you know, like when he was talking about the treatment, I was like, no, I'm like, why are you proposing this to me? I'm going to have 7 kids. I'm super fertile. Yeah, but I actually didn't know.
Of course.
Until like I did an AMH test and scans. I'd done a lot of scans before. So I knew that my ovaries were okay. I didn't have cysts or fibroids because, you know, I went through things. But I didn't know if I actually was fertile.
Of course. It's an assumption.
It's an assumption. Yeah. It's an assumption. Until you test, you actually really don't know.
On that, so let's go into this because I think this is like a huge area of confusion. What defines infertility? Because again, like, you know, being at the age we're at, you've got friends that are trying, family members that are trying. When I went through my own process of having my 2 kids, you know, you try for a few months, you're like, oh my God, I'm not getting pregnant. I'm infertile. Or like, you know, you start to jump, again, women, we jump to these conclusions because there's not enough information around it. But is there any data around, like, when are you actually, okay, this is something you need to stop? Yeah.
So the NHS says that after 1+ year that you try to conceive and nothing is happening, there's a possibility of infertility, and they offer tests through the NHS to scope the couple. Right. But you have to try for more than 1 year. I think in some bars 2 years.
Okay.
So after you do this, you have to basically go through some tests. They scan both the male and the female. They understand, you know, if there's a problem with the sperms or with the ovaries and stuff. But consider that usually at this stage, if you have been trying for like, let's say 1.5 years and you are in your mid-30s, biologically is late rather than early. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, you should start thinking about this earlier rather than later. Okay. Like before 35 years old rather than after 35 years of age. And this is because fertility for a woman declines drastically after 35 years old.
And that's so interesting you use that age, because in my mind, and I don't know where we get this number, that was always the number. It was always, when do women need to start worrying? 35. And I don't know why it's 35, but there was literally this, I saw on Instagram like 2 weeks ago, this guy went down the street and asked random women, when do women need to start thinking? And every single woman said 35. And I don't know where we get that number from. And I don't know why as women we instinctively lean to that number. Is it actually that number, or is it
is that number?
It is that number.
It's like scientifically proven that it's that number. At 30, fertility starts to decline. At 35, we see a line that starts to decline quite drastically.
Okay.
So, and, you know, again, the older we get, you can see basically, obviously, we're into menopause. So around, I think the average age of women going to menopause is between 50 to 55 years old worldwide.
Wow. And then there's obviously perimenopause, which again does not get spoken about. Perimenopause can start in its 40s, and people again
in the
30s,
in the 30s.
Yeah. And we just don't talk about it. So we get this onset of symptoms, and we're just thinking, what's wrong with me? I'm sluggish, I'm this, and actually there's real things happening. Yeah.
And then, you know, you can catch like this perimenopausal symptoms just from a blood test as well.
Wow.
Like from the AMH test, from your level, the doctor will be able to tell you, like, this looks like you're perimenopausal.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of testing available to women that, again, I don't think women even know about, like fertility testing.
AMH test. AMH test is a 30 seconds test, literally done by a nurse, and it gives you, it's a very complicated test, right? I'm going to explain it very simply, but don't take, like, I'm going to make it like very black and white. There's like a lot of layers to it that I'm not going to go through it. You know, like a doctor can explain also much better than me. But essentially, it gives you an indication of when you're going to go to menopause and how many eggs you have left. Very simply put.
Okay.
Obviously, there are a lot of factors that are attached to age. You know, like if your AMH result at 22 will be very different from a woman that tests at 32, right? So there's a lot of factors to consider, and age affects a lot this AMH test. The thing is, it's just a great indicator for how many years you have to menopause, how many eggs you have left. So it gives you a rough indication to the doctor of like, maybe you shouldn't procrastinate egg freezing. Maybe egg freezing is for you. Maybe egg freezing is very far away for you. Or it can give you an indicator if a woman has polycystic ovaries, which is big as well.
And a lot of women, again, don't even know they have polycystic ovaries until they do a test. And then they're like, oh, now I understand the cramping. Now I understand the pain. Like, you know, there's so many things can come to light. It's almost crazy that this test isn't just actually given to every woman because we have to have it to understand.
But for us, for Amilis, it's very accessible. We offer the cheapest test in the market.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so
and that's I spoke to Dana about this. So the fertility testing component, talk to me about that. So how quickly can women get that done? How long is that process? And you guys are really trying to change that, right?
Yes. So we partner with Randox facilities all across the country, all across the UK, and we offer the cheapest test in the market. Wow. This is an AMH test. You basically can book, or even if you want to do it independently, there are a lot of clinics around London that can do it. It's more expensive. On average, a private clinic will charge around £150 to do the test. But it's very simple. You walk into the establishment you decide to go to. You sit down with a nurse or somebody that is authorized to take blood, a phlebotomist, and they literally sit you in the room and they do like 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, 30 seconds, what I'm talking about, 30 seconds, and you check out. You receive the result on average after 2 to 3 days, maximum 4 days, depending again on the establishment. Wow. And you will be understanding, okay, maybe a freezing is for me, maybe I should consider, maybe I shouldn't consider, or my result is out of range, the usual range, so maybe I have a condition. So you will be able to tell a lot of things from a simple AMH test, which is like £50. Yeah. So it's very affordable.
It's amazing, and knowledge is power. And I always say that with every guest I come on. Like, I get so much information and knowledge. I feel kind of greedy having all of this firsthand, but this will just put you in a better position to make a really, really informed decision. And for someone that's listening that's maybe worried about this, isn't this just so much more powerful than rushing through your life? I'm feeling like I have to make a quicker decision with my boyfriend. I'm not sure, but I have to move. Like, this actually gives you power in so many ways.
So from my personal journey and my personal experience, I decided to go ahead and freeze my eggs. And like I told, I was in a long-term relationship. I knew it was my husband would be my partner for life and the father of my kids. But I was like, okay, I'm doing this actually for me. And, I should know if I'm fertile or not.
Yes.
I should know. And I didn't know that it was with just this simple test, I could just understand a lot about my fertility or even understand what are my next step in life. What is my family planning? Because we all know that at around 30 years old, we start planning more. We start nesting, is this the right man? Is it not the right man? If you're in a relationship, and I'm like, okay, 2 years max, I need to get married. Yeah.
Okay. The timelines all start coming in at 30.
Exactly.
Suddenly you're working in this 10-year time frame, that things need to happen in this 10 years.
Exactly. And it's biology.
Yes.
You have a biological clock that is okay, and then, I'm not going to have 3 kids if I start at 37 to have kids now. Maybe you can. Maybe I'm generalizing.
I know, but not for everyone.
Not for everyone. So, we're generalizing, and usually if you want to have, on average, 3 kids, you have to start in your late 20s. I think we did a study on Amilis that we were seeing on average, if you want 3 kids, you need to start to conceive at 27.
Wow.
Yeah, to have like, obviously it's like some gaps in between, recover and everything.
Recover, allow your body to recover and work backwards from that. I mean, and that in itself is quite a powerful number to have in your mind. So you can actually start to plan your life. Women get given this like sort of stigma, like, and it's really unfair that we're a bit crazy. We put pressure on men. We need to make decisions. I need to know if you're going to marry me. I need to know if you want to have children. But it really is a biological pull for us. And we really are on a timeline. And that's why I love that we're having this conversation, because we have to think differently.
We have, of course.
It's our bodies. And if we don't think differently, we can rule ourselves out of life experiences altogether.
100%.
If we don't make these sorts of informed decisions. So it's just a really important conversation for so many reasons.
But also you have to consider that, you know, so you start your fertility investigation, understand, I have time, I don't have time, I should investigate further, should speak with a doctor. So you understand from just a simple test, what are your paths. If egg freezing is at the back of your mind, and from the test maybe and the vaginal scan, it's something that you should really consider, then, you know, we help women on board into a clinic that meets their needs, or, you know, I'm matchmaking that with a doctor. And then when you start egg freezing, you have also so many emotions, but eventually we have to say that it comes with some risks. It's a treatment that it comes with some risk. You can be it's very well established nowadays. Even if you go on the HFEA, which is like the authority that regulates clinic and fertility in this country, they say very clearly that egg freezing is now such an established treatment that the risks are very low.
Yes.
But there are risks.
Of course. And that's what I want to talk about next, because I think, again, then it becomes this blur. So, like, there's the fertility testing stage where you can then go and make the right decision for you. Talk me through, actually, the process of egg freezing, but in a simplified way, if you can. I know there are lots of different junctures to it, but what is the time frame? What do women really need to consider in that period? If you can just give me an overview, and I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So I think the first step is decide, okay, I'm going to go for it. So you have at that stage, you have decided that you can pay for it, which is around one cycle, £6,000.
Okay.
So, you know, like, I think like every woman that does a research, they know that this is around the cost that they're going to spend for the treatment.
And that's in the UK, right? So
that's
this
in the UK.
varies dramatically from country to country, or not?
No. I mean,
okay.
In Spain, it's between €3,500 to €4,000. But you have to consider, do you have a place to stay in Spain? Yes or no? And then you add the flights, and then if you add an accommodations and stuff, it's not going to be too far from that. Okay. Unless, like, I finished my treatment in Spain, but I was staying in the house of my husband.
Yes.
You know, like, so, you know, like, for me, it was like easier than even being here, because the distances were very short.
Of course, and women in employment, that then becomes your entire holiday if you're going to take annual leave.
Exactly.
There's so many considerations.
So I will recommend, if you're based in the UK, just do it here. Yeah. Also, because you have to consider, if I'm going to use my eggs, which meaning I'm going through an insemination process afterwards, where I'm going to be living, or where is most likely that I'm going to be living, because eventually, if you need them, they're going to be stored in Spain. And then you have to go back to Spain, or you ship them to UK, which is whole another conversation, shipping.
Wow, okay.
So be practical and think about, I'm living now in the UK. Most likely, if I use them...
You want to stay close to the eggs.
You want to be close to the eggs, of course.
Which is like...
they're your babies. They're like your frozen potential babies,
God,
you know?
Stay close to your eggs. I love that. Okay, so we decide we're going ahead with it.
We decide we're going ahead with it. So we have planned for it as well, because then you decided the clinic. So I'm assuming, like, you know which clinic to go. You've done your research, you spoke with friends, or you use Amilis. We direct women to the clinics. Then let's say I'm going to go ahead, I walk in, I do my AMH test, and I do a vaginal scan, which is performed by a sonographer or a gynecologist. You have to consent to it. Okay. I'm saying this because also now we're working with the LGBTQ plus community, and you have to consent to have a vaginal scan.
Okay.
Otherwise, the treatment won't go ahead. Okay. This is very important.
Okay.
After that, the doctor says, okay, you're with your AMH of this level and the vaginal scan, you're able to proceed, and you're gonna most likely collect this number of eggs. This is based on a calculator that they have, and it's based on historical data of cycles of women at similar age that perform the treatment with similar level of AMH.
Okay.
So let's assume I'm 32. I'm taking myself.
Yeah.
I'm 32. My AMH was like around 17, and then I managed to collect 20 eggs, and 2 were not suitable to freeze, so I had 18 eggs. The doctor told me you will be able to collect around 15 eggs. So at that point, you have set expectations. The first day of your period, you will start to self-inject in yourself. They send you the medications at home. You self-inject yourself for around 5 days with one, 7 days with one. Then at the 6-7 days, you have another one. So one in the morning and one in the evening. You pinch your lower abdomen, you self-inject yourself. The process is uncomfortable. You feel bloated. Sometimes you could have nausea. But this should be like a long period uncomfortable. This shouldn't be more than that. If you have other symptoms that are more severe, you should contact immediately the clinic.
Okay.
And then go for scan and stuff. Usually at this point also they do some blood tests to check if there's an hepatitis or some viruses, because in that case, your eggs need to be stored in another nitrogen tank, because they can be stored with the other eggs that are not, of women that don't have the same conditions. Good. So let's go through all of these 12 days of injection. Last day, you take a trigger shots because you don't want the eggs to leave the ovaries. And then after 36 hours, you go to the clinic for collection day. Wow. They basically...
It's fast.
It's 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And then you go to the clinic, they put you to sleep, or they do half sedation, general anesthesia or local anesthesia. And the procedure is 5 minutes. It's a needle that goes inside the ovaries. They suck them out, and then they put them on a dish or on a pipette. And then when you recover, they will tell you, okay, we collected 20 eggs. 2 were not suitable to be frozen. You have 18 eggs. You store them, and basically they go on a nitrogen tanks. And you store your eggs. Then after a few hours, you recover. Somebody comes and picks you up. You go home. And then after a few days, you have, I had personally some discharge. A lot of women don't even have that. And that's it. Over.
Wow. The reason I said it's quick, and I'm sorry, not everyone might think that's quick, is that one of the barriers that I always thought was in place here was that from start to finish, this is a really long process. And by that, I mean like months. But I think what I didn't factor in is the decision making. And that's
a long process.
Not. Yeah.
From our primary market research, it takes around 2 years for a woman to decide to freeze.
When time is the greatest enemy as well, and
the
we
worst
procrastinate
enemy
for a long time. Okay, so it's around 2 weeks. It's around a £6,000 investment for that first cycle. I want to talk about actually success here, because you use the example of 20 eggs. Again, I have no idea what the number is. Yeah. What is a number a woman would like to hear in that? And because like you said, 2 are not suitable. And these are, again, things that you're like, what do you mean they're not suitable? But you told me, and it's like setting yourself up, I guess, for an expectation of like what actually might happen. Because they're not all going to be suitable.
100%. So this success and the successful outcomes of egg freezing means that you want to collect as many eggs as you want, right? But when you collect, for example, in my case, I had 2 eggs were not mature enough to be stored, so they discharged them. So I have 18 eggs that were mature enough to be stored. The problem with egg freezing is that you do not know if that egg is suitable to become an embryo until you go throw the egg, and then the egg gets fertilized with sperm. Right. That's the embryo has a higher success rate than the eggs, because you actually don't know the quality of these eggs when you freeze them. There's no way to date. I mean, there are new things that are coming up, so this is coming.
Change,
but to date, very few clinics offer genetic testing on the eggs.
Okay.
Most of the clinic don't, so you do not know what's the quality of the egg. So when we talk about success rate, is when basically an egg become an embryo, and then you implant it back into the ovaries, and then you have a live birth. So there's a recent study that I'm going to quote, made on around 167 women. Out of these women, they went to use their eggs in an average of 5 years. The average age of of the women were 37 years old.
Wow.
They froze on average 9 eggs per woman.
Wow.
Which is usually you want more than 9 eggs. You want around 15 to make sure that you have enough eggs to phone and then try to have an embryo. So out of this study, 74 were able to successfully phone their eggs. 74% of the eggs were unphoned. And out of this number, we had 35% of live birth. So it's a quite high statistic. Yeah. But if you think about on average, like 30% live birth, it's relatively high.
And then if we're thinking about 9 eggs, whereas we want to collect around 15, does that mean multiple cycles? Do we go again?
So it's an interesting question because I attended some years ago the fertility conference, and there was this doctor that we actually collaborate a lot now at the Great Portland Hospital. And I always stuck into my mind the stats that he gave. And the stats is like every egg you freeze is a 6% chance of a live birth. This takes into consideration all the risk factors, right? Miscarriage and the age of the woman and stuff. So if you do a calculation, this 6% multiplied by 9 is not enough to have a for sure live birth. But if you have 15 eggs, that ramps up the number because egg freezing is a game of numbers.
Okay, and that's good to know. If someone's like listening and they're in their late 30s, like, or maybe early 40s, is it too late to go into egg freezing? You do the fertility test, it gives you an answer, and then you proceed?
Definitely. So it's never too late.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, never too late.
Case by case.
Case by case, of course. It's a case by case. But we have seen women going in the late 30s, early 40s to go for egg freezing. What we have seen, and our doctor most likely will tell to these women in early 40s, is that you're probably should go already through an IVF with a sperm donor. Because, after 45 years old, there's also an ethicality question. I'm like, at which age are you becoming a mother?
Yes.
Right? So, if you are 42, you have...
There's other considerations.
There's other considerations.
Lifestyle, where you're at in that life. Energy, everything. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. And, and this is also the case when, he's worth a woman investment to spend £6,000 in freezing eggs at 42 when you can, most likely the doctor will tell you to try to conceive directly with a sperm donor if you don't have a partner.
Okay.
So, there's this factor, but I would say you can't say that it's too late until you go do an AMH test, a vaginal scan, and consider all the factors with the doctor. I would say that at this age, you have to have clear expectations. I never, in the numbers we've seen, I never came across a 42 years old woman freezing eggs and collecting more than, the maximum I've seen was 6 to 7 eggs.
Wow. Okay.
But, again, maybe case there are other cases.
Someone else is
on average.
Someone conceives naturally at 45. You
exactly.
Hear the story, and so it's so hard to. But knowledge,
it all
comes back to just go out, get as much information as you can about your body, and make the decision for you.
Exactly.
That's all you can do as a woman. Really, at the end of the day, you can just take the information about your body.
And it's very personal, right? It's very personal. We are all different. Our bodies are all different. So, there's a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration. And to your question before on infertility, also there are some couples that are perfectly fit to conceive, let's say, there's nothing wrong, but, maybe it doesn't work. And that's called unknown infertility.
That is becoming the norm. There's nothing really identified, and 12 months is a really useful number, by the way.
Yeah.
It's useful because it gives women permission. Don't panic under 12 months. It's fine, right?
Yeah.
I've been trying for 6 months. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. It's actually just normal. It's a really nice, reassuring thought that actually only at that point should you really investigate further.
Yes,
it takes the pressure off. And then they always say the more pressure you put on it, the less likely it is to happen. So it's like this self-fulfilling cycle of panic and stress, and you're actually just, it's perpetuating itself, really. So that's a really good number. I'm going to invite Dana in very quickly because as we talk about emotional considerations, I think it's really good to have a second voice on this because obviously Sarita, I haven't mentioned it yet, is a mother of an 8.5-month-old little cutie that I've already seen. And so that's one side of the story. And obviously you froze your eggs and you're in a relationship. But I think it's really useful for women who are listening going, nowhere near close to being in a relationship, I don't want to put pressure on the relationship, but I want to consider my options. Dana, if you come on in. So Dana is the marketing manager of Amilis.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the conversation. And your perspective, I think, is really interesting because you are not currently in a relationship and are going through this decision-making process.
Exactly. And I think this is what kind of differentiates the decision-making process. It really depends on where you're at in your fertility journey. I think one of the things that differentiates Sarita's from my journey, which I'm in the process of kind of making that decision of like, when is the right time to do it?
Yes.
Is whether you're single, whether you're in a relationship, whether it's you have a condition, whether you are, for example, might be going through like a transition, or for, let's say you're kind of in an LGBT Q community and you're in a same-sex relationship and you're thinking of family planning, or you're undergoing a transition or like gender reassignment, or you're taking hormones.
Yeah.
So there are different stages that you would be considering egg freezing and different reasons for it.
Yeah.
For my personal...
Working at Amilis as well and having access to all this data. Talk me through it, 'cause it's really interesting.
So one thing to know, I had no idea about anything fertility until I joined Amilis. Okay, so it's not like I came from a fertility background. And I'm like, I knew I had friends that went through IVF and had a hard time conceiving, which kind of lit this bulb and this passion. I was like, why isn't anyone talking about this?
I know.
And then I met Sarita and Yasmin, the founders of Amilis, and I'm like, why is this information not easily accessible? And they're like, go test your fertility, test your AMH.
Yeah.
I test my AMH, and it's actually on the low side. Right. So this was the initial light bulb. And I'm single, and kind of going in onto dates, you're thinking of like the dating map, doing the research, and you're like, and now you're like trying them, okay, I need to get to know him for a year, and then you decide, you're like, okay, if we get married, I'm like, do we get married? Is he the one? And then you end up going through a breakup, and you're like, oh, my chances are done.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the emotional side of things. And then you jump into the practical side. Now you're like, okay, how much does it cost? Am I going to be living in the UK? You think, am I going to be having kids after 35, or am I going to have kids before 35?
Yes.
Because that's the age that you consistently hear.
Yeah.
One thing that gave me kind of that peace of mind is that you only need one egg to actually get pregnant.
I know.
So like
that's amazing, isn't it?
There's this like anxiety about fertility, but then yes, you can do things to optimize your chances, but at the end of the day, it's only one egg that you need for you to freeze it, for you to actually get pregnant. So this is kind of the thought process. And so when I kind of went into doing my investigations, I started thinking, when am I realistically going to have kids?
Yeah.
So right now, at the stage of my life that I'm single.
And you're very early 30s.
Yeah, so I'm 31 with an AMH that is below average. So for women my age, I would say I'm like in the 10th percentile. So 90% of women my age tend to have a higher AMH than me. Wow. So this is something that is like important to note. When you do your AMH, it kind of tells you what is your egg reserve in comparison to women your age.
Wow.
So it won't tell you that, oh, you're infertile. It's going to tell you, like, how do you compare to women your age? And based off of that number, potentially, how many eggs may you get if you go through egg freezing or hormonal stimulation? And then you can assess your success rate. So I ended up looking at after 35, or am I going to get realistically have a child after 35? At my current life stage, I see that happening after 35. So I'm like, okay, I need to
But now you're in a great position because you've literally taken stock of that data and you know that you're below. And I sense like a calm in your voice of like, I've processed it and I know what I need to do.
So right now you see the calm in my voice. Initially, I was like, Sarita, what do you mean?
I know. Well, you have access to the perfect person. Like, give me the data now.
Yeah, and I'm going around asking everybody, what's your AMH? What's your AMH? What's your AMH?
And most women don't know.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, most women are like, AM what? Like, what are you talking about? Which is why we need to start talking about it.
And something really beautiful that I think in Amilis we're creating is that sense of community. So like now it's so normal to be like, oh, what was your AMH? And we chat about it.
Yeah.
And then we talk about how horrible the dating scene is. And that's why we are considering these things. Because I feel like there's a lot of conversation and controversial topics around it where people are saying, women are being pressured.
And I still think like we're generationally getting there. Like this generation that we're in, I can talk to my friends about this and literally be like high-fiving them. Like, this is amazing. What an amazing decision you've made for yourself and to reach that point, which we know is emotional, right? Mm-hmm. There's still a fear of talking to the parents about it because the parents still go to panic and your father-in-law is a massive exception here because of his background.
He's a doctor, yeah.
Most parents would just go to, well, why are you doing that? Like, but do you not think you're going to find someone? Wait, what do you're not going to get married? And they actually go to a different place. And so that's why I think we're still stuck in this and people might be holding back just because they don't want to worry their parents, when actually this is probably the best thing to do.
Also, there are so many cultural taboos. So depending on your background, I come from a Middle Eastern background. So my parents are like, the expectations that you get married.
Oh my God, absolutely. And I'm from an Indian background, and like, listen, egg freezing is like, what do you think, you're not going to get married? Why are you doing that? And it's like, no, we're just using science and data and facts, and we're women. Like,
yeah, I think my parents, they're like, they don't understand. I think that's what it is. It's like there's an element of like, if as a 31-year-old, I didn't even know what egg freezing entails. I didn't understand why
they are.
Your family would be like, what is this? Why are you doing this? It's expensive. Is it a waste of money? So that, with the education piece, I think will potentially get kind of it will become an easier conversation, but it is a harder conversation at the current time because there isn't enough information, there isn't enough awareness. And then you see a lot of, like, if you look in the news, you hear people saying like, oh, women are being pressured. There's a lot of anxiety around it. I'm like, the anxiety exists around fertility. We are waiting to have children. Women, 1 in 6 couples are experiencing infertility. So that anxiety does exist. The fertility awareness is not present.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything fertility until I hit 30. And all of a sudden it's like, when are you getting married?
You hit 30 and it's all the conversation. And it's everyone's at very vastly different stages now at 30. You've got people that have been married for years and years and years with 2 or 3 kids, and you've got other people that are not even in a relationship. So I agree. It's like now everyone in this decade is going at their own pace. And so that can be very challenging and confusing. But thank you. I really thank you for your honesty on that, because I think
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing. Because I think you work at Amilis, you have access to all of this data. And so it's like, well, isn't it just an obvious? But it's not, because like we said, there are emotional considerations, a 2-year decision-making process. And I think you've just shared like some of the things that you are actually dealing with in real time.
I know. And just a couple of things to mention in terms of the decision-making. I think there's a couple of steps to look into. The first one would be like testing your AMH, getting a vaginal scan. Do you know how many people have never gotten a vaginal scan at like 30 plus? So that would be like something to consider. When you're single, there's a lot of unknowns. So there are things that you potentially want to see, like what does your future vision of a family looks like? And potentially like if it's something that you want for yourself, is that something that you would consider optimizing your chances for? And then I would look at costs. I would look at success rates. And I think that is something that people don't usually speak about. You see the success rates and the conversation, there would be like 20 to 30% success rates for egg freezing. But that is based off of an average woman freezing her eggs at 37.
Yes.
So, but if you look at a 31-year-old that is freezing their eggs, the success rates are different.
Yes.
And so looking at those specific success rates for your age range. If we look at, for example, I'm 31, if I end up freezing 10 eggs, my success rate of getting 1 live birth is around 84%. If I wait 3 years, it goes down to around 70.
Wow.
If I freeze the same amount of eggs. Let's say I do another cycle at 20. So at 31, freezing 20 eggs, my success rates are around 94%. So the reason I bring up those numbers, because that data does exist. But as women start freezing their eggs
and I'm going to link that data as well, because I think having that in like a useful sort of like accessible, like for women just to be able to look at that and just base that off like stats is very, very, very useful.
At Amilis, we actually have a little calculator. So this is kind of, you go in and play around to see like, okay, if I wait till 33 and I freeze 10 eggs, I know that's kind of the average around that I might get for my AMH level. My chances are X. If I wait 3 years, what would happen? If I wait 4 years, what would happen? And I think it gives you an idea of like your timeline, your success rates, and then you can make a decision on
really
how many cycles,
facts, and
how much does it cost, and then you can have a conversation.
And so rather than saying it is really expensive, you can actually just say, well, this is the cost. There's no longer like an unknown, you just know.
Do you know what's funny? Women don't know how much it costs.
Yeah.
So recently we were talking to women and we mentioned the 6K. They're like, oh my God, it's much lower than I thought. Other women, they're like, oh wow, it's extremely high. So I realized there's so much variance in expectations.
Yes.
So once you know the facts, you're able to make
the best
sound
decision.
Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was really insightful. And I think it's good to get both sides of the coin because we like to have a very balanced conversation here because it's not so easy for everyone. And that's actually, I think you're like very much the reality of the decision making because, like you said, you've been in a relationship. So, Sarita, I just want to close this on because obviously the podcast is about motherhood, wellness, and career. Mm-hmm. You tick every single one, actually. Thank you for being on. Now, as a mom, I think it's really useful to have female founders, and I really want this to be a voice for female founders to share their passion, their causes. And you are a mum, you've got an 8.5-month-old, I've got a 5 and 3-year-old. We just connected on that. It's not easy.
You should do play dates.
We should do play dates.
As soon as my one is very active, so I feel she could start
interacting with us. Mine are so nurturing. She'd be wrapped in a blanket and she'd be their baby because all they want to do is be mums
Let's
right
do
now.
it.
Yeah. They would actually give you a break. Honestly, they would take care of her.
Cool.
But I just want to have like a minute or two on what it actually takes to be a founder as a mum. Is there anything you're experiencing that helps you structure your day, your week? Because again, a lot of people listen with ambition. And a lot of women have a kid and then they resign themselves to, well, I just need to keep my ambition small for the next 10 years. And that's a long period of time to keep an ambition small if you're an ambitious person. And I talk about that a lot. And for me personally, it's also very interesting. What drives you?
So you touched on a few things there. I actually, when I started Amilis, we were going on for around 8 to 9 months, and then I got pregnant, right? And then it's actually when we decided that we had to fundraise, which was a fun process to do when you are like in the first 3 months, I was a bit sick. So, I was like, not feeling fantastic. And I was speaking with investors and stuff.
That's awful.
Was not fantastic, but I was like, okay, I need to keep going, and I kept going. Like resilience, it's very important, and I think like as all women, we have it innate.
Yes.
Like it's just something that we have in there. You just have to and keep going. So I was like, okay, we'll keep going, and then something that I would share, and I think that it's very important, is that me and my co-founder, when I start showing. We decided, are we going to say that you're pregnant or not?
And you're not the first woman that's come on and said this.
No.
I felt I had to hide my bump. I didn't know what to do.
Here we go. So we went through this conversation and we decided, you know what? We're not going to say that I'm pregnant because we think some investor could pull out.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I also run a fertility company. It's like literally, I should be the queen. Like I should be like.
It should be something that's like even exciting investors. Like wow, we have a pregnant woman who's championing the cause.
Exactly. Or eventually, the humanity should kiss my ass because I keep the humankind going.
Yes,
like they should kiss all of the women asses.
We're designed to do this.
Exactly. But no, unfortunately, that's not how society works. Although I think there are some changes, going on, we're coming.
And these conversations help.
This conversation helps. So at the end of the day, towards the end of my pregnancy, I actually started sharing it. And I'm like, I was not saying, hey, I'm pregnant. But, like I was going to a lot of events.
Well, you can't hide it anymore.
Exactly, you can't hide it anymore.
It's like there's no jumpers that can,
Exactly. So I was meeting actually with investors. And, it's interesting how when I normalized it, people never, like nobody would ever say a thing to me, like there was just an automatic process. So I think, we have a bit of a duty of normalizing it. And, if you receive a comment, fight for it. Yeah. I did fight for a comment that I received from one of our investors, a lady specifically, telling me, now that you become a mother, you should tell off your investor what's your plan. Otherwise, they're going to think that Amilis is just a hobby.
Wow.
And I'm like, you clearly don't know me. Like, you clearly don't know me.
Yeah.
Seriously. And also, like, this is like, I'm not even gonna reply to this because it's a waste of my breath. But, the point is you will receive some comments, fight for it, and just keep going. And we have to normalize it.
We have to normalize
it. So that's, what I would say to female founders out there. And ultimately, now I have an 8-month-old. The first 6 months were very hard.
Yes.
I took off around 8 weeks. I'm very lucky because, we are a fertility company. We're all women. And, At the beginning, I was going with Cairo is her name, to the office. And, like Dana was holding her and my co-founder was holding her. Like, it was almost like fun moment. I was going to the office. And I have to say that now when we go to our working space, I see a lot of moms with the prams.
Yes.
With
and you
little
notice
babies.
it everywhere. I feel like when I became a mom, I suddenly was like, oh my God, they're everywhere. Like, kids are everywhere, and this is amazing, and we can normalize it.
We can normalize it.
And actually bringing them in is important to do.
It is important.
It's important to show your team, I couldn't get childcare today. My nanny is sick, or whoever's looking after her is sick, or the nursery's closed. This is what the option is for me today.
Yeah.
And then the team know, and then we're changing conversations.
Exactly, because it happens, like my nanny, like now we have a living nanny, of course, like, so every day from 10 to 5, I can work.
Yeah.
Like from 10 to 5, I can work, or I go do my gym, I do my things, and that's my time. So, like at the first, but, like also like getting a child into a new routine is another job. It's another job.
Changing. I don't want to scare you, but it keeps changing.
No, it keeps changing.
It's like a completely different routine for me that I'm like, yeah, but I think this is important because now I'd be at a stage that had I not pushed and had that resilience that you're talking about, my kids would be 5 and 3 and I'd be like, oh, what am I doing now?
Yeah,
this is why I so want women to keep pushing and just know that it's periods, you change, you adapt, but then you sleep again.
No, I get, like, look, I to be honest with you, like, I have help now, so like I'm very lucky that I have help. But ultimately, like if you're going back to work, you're gonna have to leave the child somewhere, right? So like every woman that needs to go back to work, there are
actual considerations.
There are actual considerations. I think, that's also like very important that, as you said, we normalize few things about being a mom. Like there are some days that she's going to be sick and I'm like, I have to give her my attention, and that's okay. Like, so that's also other conversations. And, like ultimately, as you said, it's hard, but
it is hard. And I never want to ever say it's not hard. It's really hard. But it's resilient. It just keeps building my resilience. I'm like, I'm just getting more and more able to cope with any challenge. Final question, and I promise we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
So obviously it's called Superwoman Isn't Real. If you would say that you have any superpower, skill, anything that you feel like is in your back pocket for whenever you need it, and you might have just answered it with the resilience, but what would you say it is and why?
Yeah, I think it's my determination, for sure.
I can feel it. I feel the energy and I love it.
I'm like a person that, like if I decide something, I'll just make it happen.
And I love that.
Like there's
and I hear it in your voice and I hear this thing of just like, well, this is what we're doing and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to make it that black and white.
Yeah. I mean, like there's like, I have, when even, like with, in my personal life, if there's something that I really like, I take this as my mission, I will make that happen.
Yeah.
There's like, and then, ultimately, like there's no mission that is, like if your mission is too small, you're not going to wake up with refreshed every morning and like with a purpose.
No. Reach a little bit higher and you'll land exactly where you need to land.
Exactly.
I love that. What a lovely thought to end on. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for this very honest conversation to both of you because you both shared very personal stories there. And we're going to include all the information about Amilis. We've tagged Sarita and Amilis so that you can find her. And if you want to obviously know more about egg freezing, they're the perfect company to be getting in touch with. Thank you for being here today. And we hope you absolutely loved this episode.